Hello, my name is Andrew Clifford. I'm the director of the Master of Conference Interpreting at Glendon College. Glendon College is one of the campuses of York University in Toronto, Canada. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about teaching interpreting online. I'll say this because the program that I run is a 2-year program. The first year of the program we teach entirely online, and the second year we teach entirely on site. So this gives us a unique opportunity, I think, to compare both modes of teaching and learning. So I'd like to talk about 3 questions that we get, or 3 points that come up again and again whenever we talk about teaching interpreters online. One of the first things that we encounter is that there are a lot of myths out there. A lot of people, when they see that our first year is online, they imagine that the learning must be very static. They make an immediate assumption that the program is part-time or not really a big investment of their time. And then the third thing they say is, well, it couldn't possibly be intense. And unfortunately or unfortunately, they're wrong on all 3 accounts. For starters, the program or the teaching isn't static. We use a platform called Adobe Connect, and that means that we're able to hold live classes. So all of the students and the teachers, they see one another, they can hear one another in much the same way that they would if they were face-to-face in a regular classroom. I can also tell you that it's not part-time. Our program is full-time even the year that's delivered online, and it's definitely not lacking in intensity. Usually every year around November, the students come to us in a bit of a panic because they've misestimated the workload, and they say, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be quite as intense as it was. And I know that when I teach an online class myself, very often after the end, say, of 90 minutes online, the students are saying, oh, can we take a break? Can we take a break? Because I feel pretty exhausted. So some of the ideas that people might have about online learning tend not to be true. These are myths that we have to debunk, I think, right from the outset. The second idea, the second question that we get from people has to do with whether online learning is cold, whether there's a human touch to it. We know from looking at teaching and learning online in other contexts that it's really important for there to be different ways for students to interact. Students can interact with the course material, and in our program they do that by having live classes using Adobe Connect, where they can see and hear one another. We also use learning management software. In our case, it's a combination of something called Moodle, which many people might be familiar with, and eClass, which is a little bit lesser known. But basically, those 2 things are a kind of a clearinghouse where we can put all of the information, all of the assignments, all of the documents that a student might need in a course in one place so they know where to find it. And it also helps guide them week by week through what they need to know. So that's interacting with the material, interacting with the teachers, obviously in the classroom, in the virtual classroom. And I know that I also have office hours, virtual office hours, where I keep my Skype open and my students can contact me during those times if they like. There's also interaction with the administration, and that's a little bit more tricky, but we found in this day and age that email is definitely broken. It's not a good idea to rely on email because of the volume of it. So instead we have an online forum where students can park questions that they might have about their learning or about the administration of the program. And we also meet with the students live, one-on-one, or in groups in a kind of Q&A format on a weekly basis. So if they have problems or things that they're having trouble navigating through the university administration, they can maybe get some answers and make some progress that way. But the most important interaction, and this is maybe where people don't imagine this would happen, is actually student to student. Yes, our students look forward to the second year in the program when they're face-to-face, but they don't wait until second year to really build solid connections with one another. So for example, our students are very quick the very first year of the program to create a Facebook page, or a Facebook group actually, to which none of the instructors have access. So it's a private place for the students, upper year, and even now our graduates, to communicate with the people coming in and answer their questions and offer them support. I also know that in a way that's very much parallel to what students might do on site. After a class ends, the students might go to have a coffee together. Well, our students have a tendency to meet on Skype, even though they might be far-flung in different places in Canada or different places in the world. They meet afterwards to say, can you believe what the teacher just said? Or I'm really confused about, so that they get the support of their peers as well. We've also seen some trickier things that when we found out about them, allowed us to intervene and really work towards the quality of the teaching. So for example, there was a course that the students weren't finding that was working very well for them. And in this particular case, it happened to be in our Mandarin stream, and in the Chinese culture, it's not really well looked upon for people to complain, especially about a teacher. So they worked out this system whereby in their virtual classes, they would choose one representative who would be on camera. The other students would say, oh, I'm having a bit of a connection problem, and freeze their cameras to save on bandwidth, and then they'd go do other things. And if the teacher asked them a question, there was one person there who would text them and say, oh, come back, the teacher's asking you a question. So we found out about this when we did a yearly evaluation, and we were able to sit down with the instructor and say, okay, how can we change things so the students are getting more value out of your course, that it's closer to meeting their needs and in involving them in more active ways. And thankfully, we haven't heard reports back about the texting phenomenon anymore. Finally, the thing that I would say is that we once used to teach the program in a way that some of the language streams were separate. So students in the Mandarin stream, for example, wouldn't initially meet students in the French stream. We've since changed that. But initially, in the first run, it was taught that way. There was one day I was teaching students in the Mandarin stream, and a student came online. I saw the backdrop where she was, and it wasn't her usual location. But I knew I recognized it, and after a while it dawned on me. She was actually in the home of one of the students in the French stream in Quebec City. The Mandarin student had recently moved to Toronto, was new to Canada, and the French stream student contacted her and said, you need to see our country, come and spend a week, 2 weeks at my house in Quebec City and I'll show you around. So our students very definitely build a very strong sense of community. The third idea I want to talk about has to do with the nature of learning itself in a virtual environment. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Recently, we ran a simulated conference with our students using a new platform that's actually available for interpreters to work remotely. This platform is called VoiceBoxer. So what it is basically is a platform to give a webinar. So one person talks and then a group of people take in the webinar passively. And that webinar can be interpreted in multiple languages. So our students have access to this platform, and we use this to simulate conferences or simulate webinars. And one of the other features of this is that you can put two different people in a virtual booth, but the two different people are located in different places. There is, when the time comes, a mechanism that people use to switch the microphone, to hand the microphone over from interpreter number 1 to interpreter number 2. And it really operates not unlike the way it does in the real world, with perhaps the active interpreter giving a nod to the person sitting beside them, the person beside them nodding back, and then the active interpreter turning off their microphone. It works very similarly. The only thing is, we held a simulation, actually, it was our Glendon students recently, and also the students at the Universidad de La Laguna, where I'm currently spending part of a sabbatical. We had the two groups of students participating in this, and the La Laguna students actually hadn't handed over the microphone in a real booth when they did the simulation. And so it begs the question, we were explaining the process to them and saying, it's just like an experience they had never had. So it was a little bit tricky that way. And it made me think, in the future, now we have generations of students who are used to doing things online, but they still remember a time before everything happened on the web. In a few years, we'll be dealing with students who are internet natives, who've never not known a time of tablets and the internet. And so will we have to think about the ways in which we teach? Because imagining that a physical knob on a physical device is the baseline for understanding, well, that might no longer be the case. In fact, as time goes on, our future generations of students might understand things, might have a different baseline. And we'll have to think carefully about how we teach them to practice our profession, both on site and online.